Welcome to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, the podcast where we explore the beautiful, messy and transformative magic that happens when we dare to go within. I'm your host, Robin Harris, and in each episode we'll dive into real, honest stories from people who've faced their fears, embraced their vulnerabilities and discovered unexpected growth in their personal lives, careers, or businesses. This is a space for deep listening, open hearts, and soul-nourishing conversations. Because when we meet ourselves in our rawest moments, that's often where our greatest wisdom starts. Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, and I have a treat for you today. I am joined by Vanessa, and we are going to, as always, start off with an introduction. Vanessa is a qualified psychotherapist and coach, practicing for over 2 decades. And in 2022, she became a best-selling author with her book, The Rebel Method. I love the sound of that. After years of active and chronic addiction, Vanessa came into recovery in 2001 to be confronted with a whole heap of self-esteem work she needed to do. She was terrified of judgment and was a chronic people pleaser. She had no boundaries in her life with others or with herself. There were abandonment issues from her childhood, and her life was limited as a result. Following a life transition into running her own business in 2017, she ventured into a spiritual path, which connected her with some of her lineage. And her journey since then has involved a deeper level of healing and discovery, which she shares as she helps others to heal their mother line and release what has been passed down to us in dysfunction and struggles due to the restrictions that have been placed on women for so many years. This journey has led to the writing of her second book, which is in the pipeline, The Mother Solution. So welcome, Vanessa. It's wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. It's so good to be here.
So I have just introduced you, which is the what of you, the things that you have done with your life. But I'd love if you would briefly share a little bit of the who of Vanessa with us now.
Of course, yes. And that introduction, even just listening to it, I was like, wow, all of those things, like, and it's been quite a journey over the last 25 years, I must say. And, just to hear it in one sentence, one paragraph was incredible, actually. But yeah, I am a mother. I'm also a grandmother. I live in Northamptonshire with my husband, who unfortunately has been diagnosed 2 years ago with early signs of dementia. However, we are growing a new relationship around that, which is actually quite fun at times. I am the proud owner of 2 pugs. I absolutely adore the countryside. I moved up here from London with my husband a few years ago, about 2015. And yeah, I mean, London's great for developing oneself, career. I got clean, and from, my recovery started in London. There were so many resources there, but I'm a country girl. Yeah, I lived in Wales for a long time. With my children. My children were brought up in Wales for the first 10 years of their lives in a cottage in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, I'm a country girl, and yeah, I'm loving the weather at the moment. It's absolutely amazing. Love the sunshine, and yeah, so that's who I am.
Fantastic, thank you. And then just to ask, what makes your story relatable for others? I'm sure those who have already heard the introduction in the bio at the beginning are going to have picked up some issues that they're finding relatable. But what do you feel is the most relatable thing about your story?
So I would say, from my experience of working with the people that I work with, and I have some wonderful people who come and work with me, mainly women, but a couple of men as well. But I've come to realize that, a lot of us have difficulties in our relationship with our mothers. And, that might be in expectations, um, some people pleasing, um, struggles with self-worth, struggles with believing in ourselves as women and men. And often, we may have a sense or a feeling that a lot of this is related to our relationship with our mothers, or we've inherited, and I'll say that in inverted commas, inherited stuff from our mothers that maybe we feel we don't want anymore, but we keep going into these patterns. And for some people, you may see this manifesting in your relationships today, with your friendships, with your relationships with partners. You may find yourself in a relationship maybe where you're the one who takes control of everything. You're the caretaker. You do everything for everybody, or you're the one who is the people pleaser. So, actually, you don't feel that your own needs are getting met within your own family system. Or you may have found yourself in relationships with people who are particularly controlling, maybe even have narcissistic personality traits, which maybe you might have just identified as being perhaps in your friendships, that you migrate towards those types of people who are very dominant and quite controlling, and you feel like you don't have a voice. So there's quite a lot in there, but I'm sure some of your listeners would identify to those key areas.
Absolutely. And it's like you said, inherited in inverted commas.
Yeah.
It's those repeated patterns in our life that we take on board, isn't it? And they just become the norm. Because particularly when it is that early stage in life with our parents, that we haven't really ventured out further afield, perhaps to a little bit of extended family, but before we start school and have other experiences to compare and contrast. And when we're in that early stage of life where we just absorb rather than filter and choose and decide how we feel about it, we're just taking everything in.
Yeah.
We're not even aware that we're absorbing those patterns or that they're different from anybody else's because we don't know anybody else's. It's only later in life when those patterns have already been by and large embedded.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
very definitely. So, who do you feel will gain the most then from the conversation we're going to be sharing today?
I think of people who are at the stage where they're like, I've had enough of this. I want to change. I'm willing and open and would like to step into something new in my life. Um, I mean, generally, I'm finding that this hits with women of, between 40 and 60. We reach that point in life where we recognize that we've got a good bit of life left. But we've also been in a pattern, with children, maybe looking after elderly parents, the children are maybe going off to university. And, I think particularly people who are left with an empty nest, people who are looking at retirement plans, people who are going through a divorce, but also people who are looking after elderly parents and finding that they've got resentments coming up, looking after elderly parents. And they want to be rid of those, but are struggling to drop them and finding it a very difficult task to do.
Those periods of huge transition
Mm,
and transitions at life points which invite, encourage us to reflect and to
yeah.
reflect on what has come before, to think about, okay, so that was what has been happening. What am I still carrying? What do I want more of? What do I want less of?
Yeah.
And for the stuff I want less of, how do I get out of those patterns? And looking at the part we've played because they've become so ingrained.
Yeah.
We have done a certain amount of contributing to that as well.
Yeah.
How do we recognize that's not actually mine and make changes.
Yeah, yeah,
So I love
absolutely.
that. And what do you hope people will take away from this conversation?
So I'm hoping that people will take away a sense of hope that change is possible, that actually that some of these patterns that we have are not your fault. Um, that and there are ways to change, to work through. I mean, the fantastic and amazing thing is about neuroscience these days and the neuroplasticity that we have, because we always used to think that our the way that we operated was our personality, that was who we were, and it wasn't changeable. But what in my work, I've come to realize and recognize and show people is that actually you can change. You can change the pattern. It can take a little bit of work, bit of effort, some commitment, um, some dedication to yourself, and things can change, and they can change quite quickly. And as you change, also that other people change around you as well. You may even find, I've had clients who've ended up with a completely new set of friendships that are a lot more fulfilling and a lot more engaging for them. They found new activities in life that they never imagined they would do, or they've gone back to childhood memories. We were talking at the beginning about childhood and, childhood memories that of things that they used to do, who they were when they were children, that's been left behind in this mesh of people pleasing and controlling their environment, doing everything for everybody else.
I'd just like to pick up on something that you said about it's not about pointing fingers of blame, either at ourselves or at our parents or anybody. It's about understanding where these patterns come from
Yeah,
and
yeah,
why we slip into them.
yeah,
And we
yeah,
slip into them for a reason. And
yeah,
often that's because that that's what we feel is safe at that time, even people pleasing, because a part of us is there saying, don't step outside, don't color outside of the lines, because to do that isn't safe. And that part of us has a very valid voice, particularly when you're a child and the power dynamics of child versus adult.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's just a part of us that's seeking to keep ourselves safe. And
absolutely.
then as we grow and we reach one of those life transitions we've been talking about, it is that opportunity and that invitation to look back and reflect and decide, is this me? Or is
Mm,
this something that I've taken on board that is no longer serving me? And I choose to do things differently. And then it's the question of how do we go about
yeah,
that?
yeah.
So then, if we get stuck into the real nitty gritty of this conversation, I'd like to start by asking you a little bit more about your own journey. Looking back, what do you think your younger self was really longing for way before you had words or understanding to be able to recognize or express it?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is probably the same as it is for a lot of people to be noticed, to be seen, to be recognized. And you mentioned earlier about it's not necessary, it's not about blame in any way, but my story was my mother was quite unwell when I was a child. She had her own mental health issues for reasons that came down her lineage from her mother. And it's a really, when I looked into the story, it's really it's a really sad story. But my mother struggled, and I was then kind of left. I was in a big, big house. Um, I had a nanny, but my mum was poorly, and my father was out working. He'd done very well in his career at that point, and so I was entertaining myself a lot of the time, um, and yeah, I mean, obviously there were adults there, but I didn't feel like I had people around me. And I really craved friendships. I craved attention. My brothers had all left home. It was, and I just wanted to be around people, but I was also quite comfortable with the isolation. I think that's something that's stayed with me actually is I struggle between the wanting to be around people, but also wanting to be isolated. But the part of me as a child was, to just be seen. And I think there was a lot of messages that came my way, which was, I needed to be quiet. I needed to not disturb the peace. Um, Mum really struggled with her moods. So it was about me being a good girl to accommodate so that Mum wouldn't be angry. So I was a very, very good girl as a young child. And yeah, so and I suppose I'm left with that is I'm very compliant as a person, but there was this part of me that needed to come out, that needed to express, that needed to be, that was allowed to be not loud, but expressive and say what I wanted and do what I wanted and, ask for things which were out of the ordinary and, yeah, have some adventures in life. And, I mean, consequently, I asked to go to boarding school thinking that was going to be an adventure. I was very much into my Enid Blyton books, and I was absolutely thrilled when the Enid Blyton Magic Faraway Tree came out earlier on this year and went with a friend to watch it because I used to read that book all the time. And I just wanted to be up this tree, with all these wild and wonderful people who had all these like different traits and qualities and little quirky things about them. So I very much migrate towards people. I love people. I love difference with people. I love to learn about people. And I think, that's kind of what that little part of me was about as a child, going to the faraway tree and meeting all these different individuals. Yeah.
And when you are on your own a lot of the time, then your imagination
Yeah.
is where you get that stimulation, isn't it? When you obviously you're reading the book, but then that's percolating away in your imagination and all these different people that could be out there that you might meet.
Yeah.
And there's a quote I love from Robert Bly, and he's talking about wild and what it means really to be wild. And he talks about a voice free to say spontaneous things. And
Mm,
it sounds like that wasn't your experience. What it was maybe what your younger self was longing for from your description,
mm,
wanting to be able to say those things that you didn't feel you could say or ask for or do.
yeah.
You just
Yeah.
didn't have those opportunities.
No, 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 absolutely not. Yeah. And I thought I'd get those at boarding school, but then actually I just moved from, and that was a shock, going into an environment with loads of other girls and very little adult intervention. So it was a bit of a battlefield, really. And having not been used to using my voice, I didn't become one of those girls that was a leader or forming the groups or one that everybody went to because I didn't have those skills. So I actually disappeared even more.
And an early example of how those patterns, which have already become ingrained in us,
Mm,
play out. We think and we hope that the change of environment will cause the change that we're longing for.
yeah,
But if we're not able to engage with that in the way that will support that,
yeah,
then what we are familiar with can just end up repeating itself, which can
yeah,
be so frustrating.
yeah, yeah. And not that I knew it was frustrating at the time. I just did what I just adapt as children do. They just adapt to their environment in the best way to not be rejected. Like you said earlier, it's a safety mechanism, to not be rejected. So whatever you need to do, or to not be abandoned and rejected, to feel safe, comes in. Yeah,
Yeah, the people pleasing comes in.
absolutely. Yeah.
And you've spent years now helping people to go on that healing journey. Has there been a moment when you realized that healing actually wasn't about becoming someone different, but about returning to a part of yourself that had never really been lost? And what did that feel like?
Yeah. I mean, my healing journey involved coming off some pretty strong substances, which I was using, um, which was all part of this rebel method, really, because I became a rebel in my teenage years. It just all came out in one big. And I think I imagined that coming into recovery was about putting down the drugs and, uh, just being clean of drugs. And I thought I'd go back to the person that I was before. I didn't even imagine there would be another person inside that needed to come out. But obviously, I recognized then that I had these huge self-esteem issues and I didn't have a voice, but I had, because there was no, I was an adult, I had a freedom in my life. There was a desire to do all these things that I'd wanted to do, to have a voice in once my recovery was established. It was like, oh, I need to do something with this part of me. And that's been surprising and difficult at times because it's meant that I've had to push myself quite hard because still, and I think a lot of us experience this when we change, everything pulls us back towards that default because it's a safety mechanism. Like you said, when we're children, it's there, it's in our kind of growth of the spine, it's there in the growth of the spine, the brain, it's established. So the default is, oh, I just need to pull away. This is too much. I need to pull away. So a lot of my recovery has been about pushing through that. And I didn't realize that that would be part of it at all. And it's funny because they say sometimes if you knew what the work you had to do, would you have done it, launched into it? And probably yes, but I didn't, I thought it would be a lot easier. But the joy that comes from doing this work and actually being connected with myself, who I am, what my true goals are in life. And in no way have I got it perfect. Yeah. And I always say that I'm a couple of steps ahead or alongside my clients, trying to guide, we're all trying to do this together to get to that place where we can be authentically ourselves, and share a message really and especially for women as well. I didn't as well realize the impact of being a female and doing the recovery work around my lineage, which has only been in the last few years. That's been surprising. And, learning about the epigenetics, which is the attachments to our genes, where we develop sensitivities to certain things. And that's been proven, with science. And, I know that I have a sensitivity to anger, huge sensitivity to anger. And that has been passed down my female lineage because I've come from a lineage of very angry, frustrated women who have been unable to be who they want to be. And so I have this sensitivity anger and my own anger even is like, if I start to get angry, I'm like, oh, what's going on? I don't like it. But anger is such a healthy emotion to have, and it says things are wrong and it needs to be listened to. So yeah, there's been lots of surprises along the way. Yeah.
I love Gabor Mate when he says, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain.
Yeah.
And if we go into something like recovery thinking, I just need to put the drugs down or
Mm,
put the alcohol down,
yeah.
and then I go back to life and things carry on.
Mm.
It doesn't tend to work that way, does it?
No,
So,
absolutely not.
whatever was there before that the alcohol, the drugs have been pushing down, and it can be many other things as well, shopping or being busy. Just being busy can be a
Workaholic.
way of, I don't want to feel this because it's so uncomfortable for me,
Mm,
whether that is anger or some other emotion. It just feels so uncomfortable. I don't want to feel it.
mm,
So something else, I use something else to cover that over. And I love that you bring up anger because so many of us, and I don't know if it is particularly, but it certainly comes across often as being particularly women, we are told nice girls don't get angry.
Yeah.
So if I'm angry, then I'm not nice.
Mm.
Ooh. So then I feel shame. And
Yeah.
if I feel shame, I want to hide that anger so that other people won't know that actually inside I'm very angry. But
Yeah.
that means that I can't express my anger.
Yeah.
And if you think of that word express, to get out,
Mm.
and if you think of emotion as emotion, energy in motion, it's designed to move.
Mm.
So, and anger, yes, it's for me, it's like in a house, you have a burglar alarm, and that burglar alarm lets you know that a window or a door or something has been breached.
Mm.
And for ourselves, that anger is some boundary of mine has felt threatened or breached in some way. And the anger gives me the energy to do something about that. And it doesn't have to be violent. It can just be, I'm going to lay that boundary down again in a very assertive way,
Yeah.
very appropriate and a very assertive and very healthy way, hopefully.
Yeah.
But that anger is serving a purpose. So if I push it down, then I'm losing that energy because unfortunately we can't press down just some aspect. So if we press down on it at all, we lose some of that energy because it takes energy to push it down. There's a great analogy of the beach ball. You know, how inflatable beach balls spring up if you try to hold them down under the water.
Mm.
It takes energy and effort to hold it down and not to let it roll out from under your hands in some direction. And it's the same with trying to keep our anger in. It's like that stress ball. It'll pop out in all sorts of weird directions. And then it's like, what's that game they have of you kind of try to keep the things down that keep popping up? That's the one.
Yes. Yeah.
So it takes all of that energy, but also when we push down our emotion, that's one, we push down any emotion such as anger, we're pushing down all of our emotions. So the world just becomes a bit grey. There's no colour to it anymore. We can't choose, I'll just not feel anger, but I'll still feel joy and love and excitement. Sadly, it doesn't work that way, does it?
No.
So
No.
finding those ways of reconnecting, as you said, remembering,
Mm.
those are parts of me that maybe I've tried to push aside or push down, not to acknowledge because nice girls don't get angry. But when I can remember them with curiosity, with compassion, with a deeper understanding of that they're there for a purpose, they're healthy when
Yeah.
they're allowed to express in the way that they are designed to work,
Yeah. Yeah.
then we become so much more of a whole being, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And Robin, compassion, I think, is so important. It's been core in my recovery and my work, with other people to just help them to have a compassionate view towards themselves because we do mess up. We are human, as we spoke about at the beginning, we make mistakes and so do our parents. And to be compassionate, to understand, to be curious, as you say, to think, oh, why is that? Because there's always a reason underneath why we are the way we are, and it's understanding those reasons can really help us to be kinder to ourselves, because the other side of it is the inner critic that can come in, and the inner critic, I think, is related to our generational lineage as well, because the inner critic is a voice that's saying, no, don't do that. Don't do that. That's going to be dangerous. Don't go there. Don't try and do that activity. Don't go and do that degree. Don't say that in public. All that's the inner critic, which we develop with that voice in our head as we are trying to adjust to our environment as children. So, that inner critic it causes lots of stress because it's telling us, that something's wrong. There's a danger over there. There's a danger over there. So you're constantly in this like fight flight situation. So we produce loads of adrenaline and stress hormone. And it's really important to actually just, if we can start to be kinder to ourselves. And, people always kind of roll their eyes at affirmations, but actually just saying kinder words to ourselves, noticing actually, I was really harsh on myself about that. I used to be terrible at if I cooked something wrong. So if I I had a bit of reputation with my children. They laugh if they listen to this about, but I used to burn food quite a lot because I I get really distracted. So I'm always trying to do 10 things at the same time as cooking. So I'd often burn their food. So they'd have burnt fish fingers. That was a bit of a, classic, the burnt fish fingers. But I'd get so angry with myself for it. And I was so stressed as a result. But, just realizing that I could, just by being nicer to myself, I felt so much better. It's like, what is the big problem? You've burnt a few fish fingers. It doesn't matter. I lost my door key the other day. And, 20, 15 years ago, that would have been World War Two, World War Three inside me because I would have been so angry with myself for making that mistake of dropping. I must have dropped it out of my pocket. So now we're kind of looked out of the house by one door because I only had one key. I was like, why didn't I get another key cut? But it's like, what is the point in hanging on to it? Because I'm just making myself stressed and anxious, and there's so many more things to life. And it's just recognizing that compassion is. I mean, for me, compassion has been the core. And I run a few retreats, and we talk about compassion for a whole day on some of the retreats because I think it's so important. So I love that you've mentioned that.
Well, because it's been a huge part on my own journey and curiosity as well. And for me, one of the big things was, I mean, what you're kind of talking about there, there's a lot of expectation, those
Mm,
shoulds, must, have tos. A lot of this messaging again that we're getting from the world around us, and that judgment as well. There's a lot of judgment in our society that's maybe not overt, but it's certainly there beneath the surface. Even things like, how do you look on your Instagram photographs? You have to look picture perfect. Just the phrase picture perfect.
yeah.
But maybe my life doesn't look like that.
Mm,
And you talked earlier, kind of not in these terms, but I love the phrase being perfectly imperfect,
mm,
because that's what we are. We're human. And
mm,
I draw a lot on nature and the wisdom of nature. And if you look at nature, things aren't exact. They're not perfectly how they might be designed if they were designed by a computer. So you
mm,
look at a leaf and it has flaws in it. You look at a face, it's not a mirror image one side to the other. If you hold up a mirror, you'll find that one side of your face looks a little bit wider or longer than the other side when you do those comparisons. So we look at nature and we know that nature isn't that kind of computer aided design perfection, but it's beautiful. It's very,
mm,
very beautiful. It gets messy at times, but
yeah,
even within that, there is beauty.
yeah, yeah,
And I think we are the same.
yeah, yeah.
And to have all those expectations is such a load of pressure and stress on us
Mm,
versus just, it's interesting that I did it that way that time. I burnt the fish fingers, or I lost the key. The key dropped out of my pocket, whatever it was, and I didn't notice.
mm,
I wonder what was going on just then.
mm,
Oh, okay. And when we do it that way, we can be compassionate and we can learn, and we can maybe, next time I'll do it differently.
yeah,
Next time I'll try it this way,
yeah,
or I'll try it that way. And I'll
yeah,
just play with it. I love
yeah.
being playful about it as well. No expectations, no have tos, no shoulds, no musts, because that's
Yeah.
also heavy.
Yeah, it
But
is.
just going
Yeah.
back to that kind of childhood, ooh, what happens if I do this? And
Mm,
and if I were just to change that little thing, what would
mm,
happen?
yeah,
How would it look different? And
yeah,
would that feel more like me, less like me,
yeah,
more fun, less fun?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
just getting to play with it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, going back to the sort of female lineage, it's specifically sort of what I've experienced by or seen by being curious about what's being brought down through my line. I see this expectation and the judgment of, oh, you can't say that. Oh, you mustn't say that. You mustn't do that. Oh, you've got to clean the kitchen floor, in this way. Or, those kind of rules that women had became. I didn't say they had, I was going to say had to, but they became to abide by for their survival in a very, I mean, I don't want to get too kind of male theme, but it was a very patriarchal, it has been a very patriarchal society.
And a
And
very yang energy, do. And
yeah,
that is very much sort of that left brain thinking, which is rules and restrictions and follow this like a code of practice.
yeah,
If you're cleaning the floor, this is how it's done. You do step one, step two, steps three,
yeah,
step four. It's
yeah,
linear
yeah, yeah,
versus the yin energy, which is quite different. And that's not to say male or female,
yeah.
because a lot of men have a lot of yin and a lot of women have a lot of yang. We all have a mixture of both, but
Mm,
it's which energy has our world encouraged and fostered, and which energy has it maybe frowned upon or tried to push aside,
mm,
not celebrated.
yeah.
So we get to then feel I shouldn't show that, going back to that sense of shame.
Mm.
So I think that's quite telling in how we've got to where we are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, really interesting to talk about it, isn't it? And just dig a little bit deeper and yeah, explore all of these things. Yeah, I can remember my mum being, she was in hospital towards the end of her life, and she was you know, there was a phone in the corridor outside. It was before mobile phones, and there was a phone in the corridor, and she was, you know, I was encouraging her because she wanted to speak to her friends, but it was like being out in the corridor on the phone was just such a difficult thing for her to comprehend, to have a conversation in public with because of the shame. It was like, oh no, I can't do that, you know, because people will hear me and I have to be quiet and, you know, I have to, you know, because she liked to talk to her friends about things that were going on. And yeah, I remember just feeling really sad for her at that point. You know, obviously today I could have just handed her a mobile phone, but you know, that wasn't the case in those days. Yeah.
Yeah, and that restriction that we can often place upon ourselves. Well, I can't possibly do this,
Yeah.
or I can't do it the way that feels more right to me, or
Mm.
more appropriate for me, more aligned for me, because, well, it says that I need to follow these particular steps in this particular order.
And what would people think?
Yeah.
That doing other people's thinking, oh, they're going to think this, they're going to think that. Whereas actually, people don't really think about somebody else. I always say to, you know, people, it's like, well, you know, what you're doing in that moment will be different news within a minute, 2 minutes, because people are actually, we're all obsessed with our own process, what's going on for us. So you see somebody in this, and we do make judgments. That's part of being human. But you see somebody, you go, oh, okay, and then you'll get on with your day. So all the worry that we have about being judged by other people actually isn't necessary, but it feels necessary
It
because
does.
it's concern because it's back to that. If you were judged or seen as different in our society, especially when you know we were in tribal society, you'd be ostracized from the group. So it's core, you know, it's there in our system to not be go out of the normal. Don't be
And
different.
when we're a child, and if we've had that experience when we're very, very young, that child is going from that hunter gatherer programming in our brain, and it's black and white. So
Yeah.
it's actually, in a way, we're not thinking it through logically and using these words, but it's life or death. I'm
Mm,
accepted by my tribe or I am shunned.
yeah.
And to be shunned means I don't have water, I don't have food, I don't have companionship and connection, I don't have shelter,
Mm,
which equals death.
yeah.
So, although we're not thinking that logically, the degree to which we respond or react to those situations, even though logically we might be able to think, what on earth am I so worried about? We still have that response in our body for that reason.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Vanessa, we are out of time.
Oh wow, we've gone all over the place, but it was great. It's really
We
good.
have, we have, and it has been a great conversation. I'm sure a lot of people are listening in thinking, oh, don't finish yet. I'd like to know more. For those of you who would like to know more, please, Vanessa, tell us where can we find you?
Okay, so I have a website which is www.crystalclearcoaching.org, and on there is everything that I do, the books that I've written, and the workshops that I provide, and quite a little bit more about me as well. Lots of blogs on there as well to read. You can find me on Instagram at Crystal Clear Coach, or on Facebook at Crystal Clear Retreats. Because as I mentioned, I think I mentioned at one point, I run retreats. But I put everything on there, all my bits and bobs and everything that I'm kind of looking at the time. And it's all very much at the moment about the book, The Mother Solution, which is due to come out very, very soon. And there'll be a link in the notes as well to a pre-launch offer, where if people want to get the book pre-launch, they can sign up to do that as well and come along to one of my online events, which I will provide recordings for as well. So yeah, that's where I am.
That's fantastic, and lots of exciting things in the pipeline.
Yeah.
So, yes, if you have listened to this conversation and you want to know more, do check out all of those dates. They'll be in the notes below this video. And also, don't forget to hit subscribe and follow along. See you next time. Thank you for joining us. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. I hope it's given you a moment to breathe, reflect, and perhaps even see your own story with a little more compassion. If you find this conversation meaningful, I'd love it if you'd share, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps others find their way here too. Until next time, take gentle care. And remember, the journey inwards is where the real growth begins.